There are a lot of pizza tutorials out there on YouTube, but a lot of them leave out a lot of the important details about how to make the dough, how to make the sauce, how to build the pizza. So today I'm going to show you my process from start to finish of how to make two delicious classic New York pizzas. The original plain slice and a white slice with ricotta and fresh mozzarella. So to get started, we need to make our dough. And this is the part where most people struggle. So let's break it down. We're gonna measure things by weight here because that's the only way to do this accurately. So get yourself a kitchen scale. They don't have to be super precise. You just need one that can measure in grams. Now for flour, I like to use bread flour, but you could use all-purpose flour. You will get better gluten development out of bread flour. And what that means is you're gonna get a little bit of a chewier slice, as is the New York style. But again, if you can't find it, you're still gonna make pizza. It's still gonna be delicious. Just go for it. So I'm using a stand mixer, but you can totally knead by hand if you want to. Regardless, into whatever bowl you're using, throw 500 grams of flour. And this is gonna give us 4 personal ultra thin 12-inch pies, or 4 personal relatively thin 10-inch pies. It's up to you how thin you wanna press it out. Next, we'll add 7 grams or 1 packet of active dry yeast, and about 7 grams of salt. Next, into the bowl, I'm gonna add 300 milliliters of warm water. That gives us a 60% hydration. Hydration is the amount of water to flour. So if we were working with 1,000 grams or a kilo of flour, a 60% hydration would be 600 milliliters or grams of water. Now I'm going with 60% hydration because it's starting to get warm out here in New York, and in warmer weather, lower hydration tends to give me better results. For comparison, in the wintertime, I go up to a 65% hydration. So it's all about trial and error. And if your first batch comes out a little bit too stiff, then add a little bit more water next time. So with my dough hook attachment on, I'm gonna go ahead and knead this dough in my stand mixer until it comes together into a really beautiful supple dough. If you're kneading this by hand, you may have to do it for 8 to 10 minutes to develop the kind of gluten that you want. I do prefer using a stand mixer or just a wooden spoon in a bowl, because I find when I do it by hand, I have the tendency to want to add more flour. So if you do it by hand, just keep kneading it. Doesn't matter how sticky it is, but resist the urge to add more flour. Once it comes together, go ahead and divide it into 4 even pieces and throw each of those into a separate container. No need to shape it here because it's gonna rise and it's gonna change shape. Just throw it into a container, and you can either freeze it at this point and come back to it later, or throw it into your fridge for 2 days. This is called a cold ferment. Basically, it slows down the yeast so it's not eating as fast, it's not gonna rise as fast, and the end result is a lot more gluten development for a chewier texture and a lot more flavor development. Gives it a little bit of a sourdough flavor, which is really nice. And if you're liking this tutorial, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and be sure to hit the notification bell so YouTube lets you know when I have a new video coming out. All right, while our dough is fermenting, let's go ahead and make the sauce. So I'm gonna show you what's basically my family tomato sauce recipe that's been adapted slightly for pizza use. So into a pot over medium heat, let's throw a good glug of olive oil. And once that's shimmering, let's add a tiny minced onion, or half of a normal sized onion. You wanna mince this pretty finely because we don't want any large chunks in our tomato sauce. We want a really uniform texture when we're going to eat our slice of pizza. No pockets of onions or tomatoes. And add in a few cloves of minced garlic. Go ahead and saute those until they're soft and fragrant. Then we'll add in some crushed red pepper and some dried oregano. Normally I'd use fresh basil instead of dried oregano, but I don't have any fresh basil, and dried oregano gives a little bit more of that classic New York vibe. Mix those in well and toast them for a few minutes. Then we'll add in a 28 ounce or 800 gram can of pureed tomatoes. Normally for my family tomato sauce, I would use crushed tomatoes. They give a little bit more texture when you're dealing with pasta, but again, when it comes to pizza, we want a uniform texture and no pockets of crushed tomatoes. Next, fill the can about halfway with water and dump that in as well. The extra water thins out our sauce so we can simmer it for a while and develop the tomato flavor without thickening it up too much. Go ahead and season that with salt and pepper. Bring it to a very low simmer, just tiny little bubbles popping to the surface every once in a while. Cover it partially with a lid, and the nut tip of the day is to use your wooden spoon to prop open the lid. Let that simmer for about an hour until it reduces by half. After an hour, transfer that to a container, let it cool on down, and throw it into the fridge until we're ready to use it. All right, 2 days are up and we're ready to bake our pizzas. So 2 or 3 hours before you're ready, let's get the dough out of the fridge, and it should have risen like this. If it didn't, that means your fridge is too cold, which is totally fine, but you're gonna have to leave it out on the counter for a few hours before you can use it. And when it is risen, go ahead and remove it from the container, pinch one side together into a ball like this, and then using the sides of your hands, we're gonna roll it around in a circle till the outer skin tightens up and the seam comes together on the bottom. Now throw that into a well-oiled bowl. Go Cover it up with plastic wrap. And set that aside for a couple hours until we're ready to use it. Now, if you're using a home oven, about an hour before you want to make pizza, go ahead and preheat your oven to its maximum temperature. And for maximum crispiness, I'd recommend using a pizza stone, but they can be a little bit pricey, so any lead-free terracotta tile should be fine. They're much cheaper and can be found at your hardware store. Alternatively, for a while I switched to using a baking steel, which is a 2 or 3 millimeter thick sheet of steel. They tend to heat up quicker and they're easier to care for as well. And if you're really serious about making pizza and can afford it, then I'd recommend getting an uni or a Breville pizzaiolo. They can be pretty expensive, and the unis especially are hard to get a hang of. I just got a Breville, not a sponsor. It is the easiest thing I've ever had to deal with. Preheats on its own, it's got a self-timer, is basically foolproof. And I'm interested to see what kind of pizza setup you guys have going on at home. So go ahead and follow me over on Instagram at KevinAllOverTheWorld and send me a photo of your oven, your pizza stone, or your pizzas so I can see how they turned out. All right, with our dough relaxing a little bit and our ovens preheated, let's work on the toppings. When it comes to cheese, there are two options you can go with. There's fresh mozzarella, which is creamy and wet, pretty expensive depending on where you get it, and it also doesn't produce the best results when it comes to New York pizza. If you want to use that, then I recommend pressing it between a couple sheets of paper towels to get the extra moisture out. Otherwise, I'd go with a block of low moisture mozzarella. This is basically the same thing as fresh mozzarella, except it's got its moisture extracted from it. It becomes a much denser, much more intensely flavored, and much meltier cheese. Now you could shred this with a box grater, but I prefer to just slice it into thin slices. It works just as well, and we don't have to clean another utensil. And now for the white pizza, I'm gonna make a sauce out of a few cloves of minced garlic, one raw egg, and about 125 milliliters of ricotta. You can use the fancy stuff, you could use the cheap stuff, whatever it is, use the full fat version for more flavor. Go ahead and season that with salt and pepper. And mix that together into a creamy sauce. And for the white pizza, I'm gonna use that fresh mozzarella. It'll help things stay nice and creamy on top, as well as some thinly sliced zucchini. Something about white pizza and greens works really well together. All right, so our dough is well rested, so let's go ahead and dust our work surface with some flour. Since it's been sitting in oil, you may need some extra flour so it doesn't stick to the board. And now as gently as possible, let's remove it from the bowl. I like to let gravity do most of the work so that we don't lose its round shape. And once it's on the work surface, gently press it out around its perimeter. Careful not to press the edges too much. We want that nice fluffy crust, and the more you press it out, the less it'll rise. Once you got the outside edge pressed out, you can start stretching the edge radially, keeping the other hand on the middle of the pie. And once you've got it as thin as you want it to go ahead and add a surprisingly small amount of sauce. You don't want to overload this. The soggier it is, the harder it'll be to move it from our peel into the oven. And now let's tear our slices of mozzarella and spread them out evenly. Now when it comes to transferring this to the oven, we've got a few options. I recommend using a wooden pizza peel. I found metal ones tend to stick to the dough a lot quicker, which makes building and transferring it to the oven a frantic dash as you're racing the clock. Wooden ones tend to just not stick as much, which makes it nice and easy to slide off. Now unfortunately my fancy new pizza oven came with a metal peel, and my wooden pizza peel does not fit inside of it, so I'm kind of stuck here. Now, if you don't feel the need to develop your skills in sliding pizzas into an oven, it is 100% okay to build this on a pizza tray. You've got these flat bottom ones, you've got the ones with the holes in them, both of them are fine, both of them produce great results, and you can use them in conjunction with a pizza stone and get similar results in a little bit more time. Either way, go ahead and dust your peel with a light coating of flour, and gently gripping underneath the edge of the pie, slide the pie onto the peel. You can gently reshape it on the peel. And now let's transfer it into the oven. I find it's best to keep the peel as parallel as possible, put it as close to the back of the pizza stone as possible, and give it a firm shake. Now close the door and bake your pizza for anywhere from 7 to 15 minutes, depending on your oven temperature. You really want to keep an eye on it and pull it out as soon as it looks golden brown and crispy, or as soon as the cheese has melted and started bubbling. And for a standard home oven, I recommend turning on the broiler as soon as the door is closed. This will help generate the high temperatures that you'd get from a commercial oven. And depending on your oven's heat distribution, you may have to rotate it halfway through, but close the door as soon as possible. You really don't want to let the heat out. Now for a white pizza, let's take that ricotta sauce, spread it on as thin as possible. Lay some slices of fresh mozzarella down. And lay on our zucchini slices. Drizzle on some extra virgin olive oil. And sprinkle on a little bit of salt to season it. Same thing now, let's slide it onto the peel. Jostle it into the oven. And let it go for as long as it needs. So there you go, 2 New York classics, both packed with flavor. You've got the classic plain slice balancing a little bit of saltiness from the low moisture mozzarella, a little bit of sweetness from those canned crushed tomatoes, a little bit of spice from the crushed pepper. Really ticks all the boxes of what you think of when you think of pizza. Then you got the white slice, it's a little bit unexpected, it's a little bit garlicky, a little bit creamy, and dare I say it's a little bit fancier than a regular pizza. So I hope I've given you the tools that you need to start making pizza at home. I know you can do it because I started from the bottom, now I'm here. No, I'm not gonna go with that one. And no matter what, there's no such thing as bad pizza. Okay, maybe Little Caesars, but no matter what shape it comes out in, it's still edible and it's still gonna put a smile on your face at the end of the day. So I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.